Hi, I'm Luke,
And I'm TJ.
and welcome to Beyond the Building.
Give me the Bible, holy message shining. Thy light shall guide me in the narrow way. Precept and promise, law and love combining, till night shall vanish in eternal day.
Welcome to Season 2, Episode 11 of Beyond the Building. Thank you for joining us here in this Bible study. As always, this show is available on YouTube and Spotify every Friday at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Before we get into this week's episode, I am on storytime duty for this week. It's not much of a story, but maybe more of a life update. I am working at Chick-fil-A now. I'm a part of the chicken shack. I'm wearing the red polo, the navy blue slacks.
Are you an associate?
Is that what they call us?
Is it what they call
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
I think I'm a cast member. Wait,
okay.
no, that's Disney. Team member. There we go. I'm a team member.
Okay.
I'm a team member. As far as I know, I'm not going to be having to dress up in any, costumed outfits. So
I was looking forward to you wearing the
the
classic cow
Yeah.
costume. Yeah.
That is a job that you can do. Well, obviously, because people do it. But I guess I would be able to do that. I'm not going to. Not for me. But yeah, no, it's been fun so far. It's cool it's really my first job, ironically. But it's cool to be able to serve others. I'm going to be the most basic Chick-fil-A guy. Our core four. No, I'm not going to go into that. But no, it has been a fun job so far. Just learning new things, picking up stuff on the job, and just how I'm learning the ins and outs that other people don't see at Chick-fil-A, which is really cool because there are so many different menu items that you don't know that you can get. Like you can buy at the front counter like a little chicken sandwich keychain, or like a plush cow. You can ask to buy some of those, and we'll get them for you. Which I didn't know. Or like you can, add different variations to the milkshakes. You can add cookie crumble on top. You can add, whatever. And it's like, you don't know that.
Are you supposed to be sharing this?
It should be fine.
Are these trade secrets?
As far as I know, I won't get canned because of that. But no, but seriously, it's so cool to see some of that stuff behind the scenes. And it's a fun job, keeps me busy, and gets me money, and it's also enjoyable. So, fun time. With that, I will quote the famous quote: "Marriage is what brings us together today," because it is. The topic of this week's episode is the purposes of marriage, and this is going to be a fun one for us because we kind of have two differing perspectives here. Not differing, I should say, but two different perspectives because he is married and I'm not. Luke is married and I'm not. So I'm going to take the prerequisite position of preparing for marriage because I am in the dating scene and doing the dating thing. Shout out to my amazing girlfriend. So there we go. And Luke is doing the marriage thing. So it's cool how we have these two different perspectives, and I think that can yield a lot of benefit to this conversation. So I'll start off with, in today's culture, dating is kind of the norm, and we discussed this in our episode planning, just about what our thoughts are in dating and the current state of our culture in that regard. And dating really that's the mainstream thing that you do, right? You ask someone out, you say, all right, we're boyfriend, girlfriend now, we are, in a relationship, and at least in our modern culture, in secular culture, we will have these flings where it's just, it's kind of flippant. The dating scene is, we're just kind of hopping from person to person with no intention of anything. And then, of course, we have hookup culture where we're just going around having sexual relations with everybody and building your quote-unquote body count and all that. And we'll dive into that as we go through this episode. So really, to start off from a biblical point of view, the goal of what we do in today's society of dating, the goal of that is to find a suitable spouse from a biblical perspective. And it's important to remember that marriage is not a requirement. God doesn't require every single person to get married. If you want to turn with me to 1 Corinthians 7:32, which a little reminder here. Please, as you are joining us in this Bible study, which we are very thankful that you're here, we would love and appreciate you come with an open Bible. Test us by the Scriptures. We are not your sole authority on things Bible related. We enjoy studying the Bible, and we enjoy unpacking its intricacies and what God wants from us, but that means nothing if you don't go and dive in yourself. And I guess I'm kind of off today because I forgot to kind of give our mantra at the beginning, so I'm going to give it right now. The goal of this show is exactly that, to encourage Christians, members of the Lord's body, to go beyond the building in their Bible studies, because we'll be in our Sunday morning assemblies, midweek Bible studies, any times that we gather with the saints, and we'll be energized, invigorated, have a zeal for God, and then maybe during the week that kind of dies down. So our goal with you is to come together and go beyond the building in our studies. So back to 1 Corinthians 7:32. But I want you to be without care. He who is unmarried cares for the things of the Lord, how he may please the Lord. But he who is married cares about the things of the world, how he may please his wife. So this kind of unpacking the two different people, and both of those are approved instances by God, that it is not required for one to be in a marriage relationship. But the authorized method of the end goal is towards marriage. It wasn't necessarily, well, I'm not even going to use that word, it was not intended for us to have these pseudo-marriage relationships and not have an intention of going further with that to marriage. So that kind of puts I don't even know what the word would be. It puts a stop to the notion that, well, you can just kind of date for fun with no end goal or purpose or anything. Right? There is a definite goal in building relationships with those of the opposite gender. So marriage is the intended design, and like I said, in our culture, we secularly treat dating very flippantly. Like I said, the hookup culture with having sexual relationships with as many people as possible, and well, it doesn't really matter, you know, we're just dating to hang out, and it probably won't lead to anything. And it's like, what are we doing? Because we know that the design is marriage. It's not intended for for lack of intention and for flippancy. So what are we exactly doing? And you had brought up, the analogy of people are like, who have been dating for like 2 years, and are just now getting to know each other, right?
Yeah. So, kind of like what you were saying, our culture in the West is rife with this type of culture, which is very, very loose and casual, and not really concerned with more important things and like the ultimate relationship between a man and a woman, which is marriage, and instead treats that sort of relationship and the things intended for that relationship really flippantly. And that has a lot of effects, and one of those is that sometimes, like you were saying, people will just hang out for a long time and don't know anything about each other.
Be in a weird gray area.
Yes,
right?
and I mentioned earlier, like if you're serious, if you're really trying to get to know the person to the point of you want to marry them, how long will that take you?
And I said generally speaking, maybe 2 to 3 months, right?
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, I see it always on like TV shows where it talks about people who have been dating for 6 years. The thought that's always in my mind is, what were you doing for 6 years? What were you doing for 6 years? And that's not to say that people can't date for a long time and that there's anything wrong with that. But just that I think it's interesting to me that sometimes you can see the strongest marriages had very short dating periods because the people involved were very serious.
Yeah.
I had
and intentional.
Yes,
I will say
intentional.
That.
Personally, I know of a couple back where I'm from who dated for I want to say a few weeks, maybe even like like 1 or 2 months.
Wow.
But they were older. They were like in their I think 30s. So they were more serious about it. And to kind of go off of what you're saying, I don't want to completely like derail this,
Yeah.
but here in America, our churches are not immune to our culture.
Yeah.
And I think as we'll kind of, and maybe you could talk a little bit more about this, but we need to make sure that we're not, as Christians, even if we're not engaging in sinful acts with our boyfriends and girlfriends,
Sure.
we need to make sure that we're not letting our culture negatively impact us and kind of devalue the important relationship between man and wife.
Yeah, and I think people might often use dating as a substitute for marriage. And a lot of this, in my humble opinion, is a lack of commitment from society in general, right? Because people are like, well, I don't want to be joined. I don't want to be committed to this one person. I mean, you look at and we'll get into some statistics in a few minutes here, but you look at like the divorce rates and how staggering those are. You know, those are either people who have not prepared themselves for marriage or did not, I have this in my notes here, I just lost it, but anyways, whatever it is. But a lot of the times I feel like people don't prepare adequately for marriage or don't know how to handle the actual marriage relationship. That's what I was going to say. So these staggering divorce rates, and I don't, like you said, I don't think we take marriage as seriously as a American Western culture, and that, you know, we are staying in this limbo of, well, if we're dating, I don't have to we can leave at any point. It's an open-ended relationship, and that's not how it was intended to be.
Yeah. I think I mentioned during our planning conversation that often the modern dating relationship, it tries to have all the benefits of marriage with none of the responsibility and none of the commitment. It's all very superficial, and you can leave at any time. There's no reason for you to stick around.
Good old get out of jail free card.
And that's not to say, right, that I'm not saying that if you're in a bad relationship and you're dating to stay in that relationship. I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that we need to have a more serious mindset to where if it's a really obvious serious problem, you should not be in that relationship long. And again, we're talking in generalities a lot in this episode. I think
Definitely.
There's always exceptions. There's always anytime anyone speaks in generalities, there will always be one person in the back that says, actually, my situation is the one you're describing should not happen.
Definitely.
There's always that. And we understand that we're talking about society as a whole.
Yeah,
in
correct.
general, it should not take you that long to notice major red flags.
Yeah, and I think if you are dating with intentionality, you will more quickly and better understand the person who you are in a relationship with, because you have that, and both parties are of the same mindset of, we are dating for a specific purpose to get from point A to point B. And that allows you to better understand the other person, and it happens so much quicker, in my opinion. So before we kind of get into Luke's side of things and living in marriage, I want to go through some general wisdom that we can apply to getting, like I said, from point A to point B of a dating relationship to marriage. So one, we need to know who we are as people, as individuals, before marriage. We must have an identity. We must be able to, as Christians, we must be able to say, I'm a Christian first and foremost. I am my own person. I know how to handle different relationships, right? Because kind of going back to the divorce rates, you might see people who did not prepare adequately for marriage. They don't know who they are, they don't whatever, and that causes problems. So if we have a good internal identity and you are set and confident in where you are, that will set you up much more for success in the future. Because as a man, we can lead our future wives better, at least your current wife, right? And only one, I guess. I don't know why I said current, but you can lead your wife better as a man, but as a wife, you can fit into your role as well, because we have prepared to get there sooner rather than later, waiting for it to come to us, right?
Right. And the verse, if you remember the reference, that would be super helpful. But do not be deceived. Bad company corrupts good morals. It's a general rule, and then there's also the general wisdom that you often hear from your parents, right? Show me your friends, and I'll show you who you are. It's a general rule that we are impacted by the people we hang out with, that we are around all the time.
Yeah.
In a romantic relationship, you would assume that you're going to be around that person quite a bit. You're going to be interacting with them a lot.
Yep.
I always kind of laugh because whenever I see couples that are almost the exact same person.
Yeah,
and,
that's so funny.
I've had some friends in the past who they've gone to a couple different relationships, and then you can see that they slowly kind of become closer.
We're all just narcissists, guys.
Well, kind of what I'm trying to say is that like some of that's humorous, and a lot of that is mundane and not that damaging.
Sure.
But what you were speaking about specifically, about knowing who you are before marriage and having a personal identity, if you're not strong in your faith, if you're not a strong Christian, you need to be able to, when you enter a romantic relationship, if you see a spiritual weakness in that person, not be affected by it.
Yep.
You need to be able to not lose your own spirituality by it. And that goes into, well into marriage and so on and so forth. A lot of times, and we were talking about this earlier, a lot of times we push our young people into romantic relationships when they are either they just were Christian, last year, or they're teenagers.
Yeah, they lack a certain maturity level to be in a relationship.
And sadly, we're often surprised by when our children fall away. Yeah. And I say this as if I have kids. I don't have kids, but I have seen it. Yeah. And so I think we should not be so forceful upon our young people that they need to enter into romantic relationships so zealously, especially when, like what we just said, if they're still young, they're still developing a sense of self, a sense of identity.
Yeah. Definitely.
Especially a Christian identity.
Yep.
Now, that's not to say you can't change with your spouse and grow together.
You will.
Yes, I got married as soon as I graduated college, right? So, like, someone could say the same thing to me. Well, you didn't know who you were. I knew what was important to me.
Yep.
And that's hopefully, it hasn't yet, and I don't imagine it ever will change.
Yep.
Now, I've changed in other ways and in much smaller, less important ways. And that's fine. Yep. I think kind of the heart of what you're saying is we need to make sure that we are firm in our foundation with Christ.
Yeah. So your verse reference was 1 Corinthians 15:33.
Thank you.
For the verse from earlier. And I like your point about, recognizing spiritual weaknesses within the person you're in a relationship with, because we all have them, right? There's no instance where your, wife, husband, boyfriend, girlfriend is not going to, recognize those things. If you're both working spiritually, we're all going to have our spiritual issues. We all have them. And it's important that we remember to not date a specific person because they're quote-unquote perfect, right? Or because they're so holy and godly and whatever, right? Now, of course, we want to choose our spouses because they are faithful and willing to work to get where they need to go, right? Because the minute, you kind of realize, oh man, this person isn't perfect. And if you don't have that identity and that understanding of this person is not perfect, it's going to hit you like a brick, right? And you're going to be like, well, what do I do now? Right? So we don't enter into relationships with people seeking perfection, but what we do seek is faithfulness to God and a willingness to grow in the faith. And that's what God expects of us as well, God does not expect perfection from us, but God does expect faithfulness and a willingness to grow and to learn and study and be faithful to him, which I think is so cool how it's, we see in Ephesians how Christ in the church is a marriage, right? And it's so similar in so many ways. And of course, that I can only think that must be, right, intentional, that the Holy Spirit specifically chose that to be an analogy there, which is so cool, and that's such a powerful analogy to make. So I kind of wanted to make a note of, along these lines of independency, being codependent, because that is, we'll hear that word so often, especially within like therapeutic circles and realms of that nature, but understanding what exactly codependency is and how we can avoid that is incredibly important in whatever relationship you're in. So understanding that we all have to be independent. We can't rely on other people to regulate our emotions for us, to make decisions for us, to kind of take control when we're in a state where we feel like we can't. Because that leads to an unhealthy relationship in the fact that, let's say I'm dealing with a problem, and my spouse, I rely on them to help pick me up and to help make me feel better. Well, if that's the case, well, what happens when your spouse can't be there at the moment? What happens when, XYZ happens? You're going to be in a lot of hot water because you don't know how to handle yourself. And this comes with knowing who you are and being able to emotionally handle yourself and emotionally step up and be a leader, right? Especially as a man, speaking from the male perspective of stepping up and being a leader. And likewise, the emotional regulation aspect works both ways with men and women, right? We need to learn how to do that ourselves so we don't force that upon other people. So that's a very, very crucial part. And there's a big difference between emotional regulation and empathy, because we want to feel for our spouses and boyfriends, girlfriends, because it's important to have empathy, right? What's the verse that's like, mourn with those who mourn, weep with those who weep, and things like that.
Romans 12:15.
Romans 12:15. Can you read it real quick?
Yes. Let me get this version.
Yeah.
12:15.
So Romans 12:15 is the verse that we're going to look at.
Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep.
Yeah, so it's this aspect of having empathy and being there for others and understanding, man, I know what you're going through. I'm here to help, right? There's a huge difference in that and being codependent, relying on other people to do that for you. So anyways, I just wanted to kind of note that before we moved on. Additionally, you kind of mentioned it, there will be a learning curve in every relationship. We're not perfect, and we start from a point of, we start from a point, right? And then we get to another point from there with hopefully growth in that. So yeah, I mean, it's exciting to be able to learn and grow with your partner. Right? It's not just like, oh, well, we're already ready. Now we're going to do the thing. Man, that's why it's so exciting to be in relationships, is because you can learn and you can grow, and that's an amazing thing that God has given us, an ability to do that with, in the case of marriage, with someone who is joined to you and who is close to you like that. So now getting into living in marriage, Luke is going to take over with that. So take us off with kind of your initial thoughts with this.
Yeah, so there's several reasons to get married.
Which, by the way, sorry to interrupt, but the video is called The Purposes of Marriage. So this first part was kind of just a preface as to some general wisdom in preparing for marriage. We're actually going to get to the meat of the issue with why get married. So anyways.
So like TJ said, this is kind of the main, we have a list of just a few reasons why you might get married. Yeah. The main reason, starting all the way in Genesis 2:18, is companionship, right? Genesis 2:18 says, "And the Lord God said, it is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him." From the very beginning, right, that you could argue that God directing Adam to name each animal and bringing every animal before him was a direct, It was for the express purpose of making the man see, oh, I'm missing something. There's nothing here for me right now. There's nothing here that can be comparable to me.
Yeah.
So depending on if you read it that way or not. From the very beginning, though, it is very clear, right, that out of all the animals on earth, out of everything that's on the earth, there's nothing comparable to man other than man.
Yeah.
We are social beings, and we need each other. And so from the very beginning, I keep saying from the very beginning.
From the very beginning.
From the very beginning, though, God recognizes or tells us you need companionship.
Yeah.
You need someone. And like TJ said earlier, 1 Corinthians 7:32 and following talks about how you don't really have to get married, because if the single person thinks about God more, has more opportunity to serve the Lord, and the married person cares more about their spouse.
Mhm.
Right? It's not for everyone. Not everyone should or wants to get married.
Yeah.
That's fine. But generally speaking, a generalization, there's a reason a lot of people are married.
Yeah.
And even if you're not married, you want some form of relationship with someone, whether it just be a friendship or something else. So that's one of the reasons why you might decide to get married, for companionship. It's pretty evident, at least from the scriptures. There's also another reason, which is slightly different, but it is commitment. This is kind of, I guess, an aspect of that companionship, because other relationships can kind of come and go. They can kind of, wax and wane over the years. You can, if you move, your friends may change. You may lose contact with them.
Sure.
As you get older, generally speaking, you lose touch with some of your family and things like that. Let's stick close to your immediate family, at least. Always make time for your family. But sometimes it can't be helped. Like, I don't really know my third cousins.
Sure.
And there's lots of reasons for that. But marriage is one of those relationships that is always constant. It's or at least it's supposed to be. It's designed to be something that you can always rely upon.
Yeah, and I think there's a certain power in the fact that, like, we can take, I hesitate to say we can take pride, but we can take pride in the fact that, man, that's my wife, and she's my wife for life. That's so awesome, right? Like that I have this person who I am committed to, and I'm committed to building this person up and being with them. So I think there's something so powerful about that. I think that's really cool.
Definitely. And it not only helps us, it strengthens us, right?
Yeah.
Ecclesiastes 4:12, while not necessarily talking about marriage, although I think it definitely applies, it says, "The one may be overpowered by another, two can withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken."
Yeah.
Right? This verse is speaking to the power of relationship, especially committed relationships, and marriage is one of those things, right, where life can be awful sometimes. Bad things happen to everyone. And if you don't have someone there with you who can stand with you against those trials, it can be really difficult. Marriage is almost a kind of, it's a built-in relationship. It's a built-in stronghold, if you will. Yeah. And I know you were talking, right, it's really important not to be codependent, where you must have the other person to emotionally regulate you. Yeah. But sometimes people need that. Yeah. Sometimes people need that another person to kind of regulate their emotions, be there for them, comfort them. And that's one of the benefits of that.
And I guess we like definitions of words on this show. I guess at least what I'm talking about with emotional regulation is more of like constant. It's more of a constant, I just can't handle myself, rather than like man, I need someone to help pick me up, because like you said, sometimes we do need that. I need that, Like we all need that at some point, so you're exactly right. Yeah.
And speaking kind of about this, right, this is not a marriage, divorce, and remarriage episode. Maybe that will come later. But it is not, it's meant to be, well, okay. With friendships, there's always a degree, and it varies, but
Yeah.
there's always a degree of, okay, I need to make sure I don't overstep here,
Sure.
right? There's always a degree of, okay, I need to make sure I don't, well, overstep is the best way to kind of express this idea, right? It, other relationships can, for very good reasons, come to an end. And there's the cause of that can be a lot less,
Yeah.
sometimes even unintentional. Marriage is designed to be, in my mind, the one relationship that, for only one reason,
Yeah.
ends. Other than that, it is there.
Yeah.
This is something that you're supposed to work on, and that's not to say that there won't be problems and that there won't be awful marriages that
Yeah.
are toxic to the people involved.
Most definitely.
But it is designed to be a relationship in which you both know, okay, even if I mess up really bad, I can still work with this person to fix it.
Yeah. Well, and we see that in, Mark 10:9, which is our next scripture here. Therefore, what God has joined together, let not man separate. God is the only authority that has the authority. I kind of cooked myself with that one. Sometimes we'll speak and then we'll be like, I just set myself up for grammatical failure. That's probably maybe the nerdiest thing I think we've said on this show. I've set myself up for grammatical failure. T-shirt idea, by the way. T-shirt. But God is the only being who has the authority to separate a marriage, right? Who sets the parameters for that. He instituted the organization of marriage, and he has the authority to separate it. So I think that's important to remember, and we see that in the divorce statistics as well,
Yeah.
right?
So we touched on this a little bit. Divorce, and in my mind, it is a symptom of the syndrome of lack of commitment,
Yeah.
or however you want to phrase it. But basically, our culture is treating, like we've talked about, this deep relationship of marriage as something flippant,
Yeah.
as something that's not as important as it ought to be. And so there is, this is from Pew Research Center. It says that in 2023, 1/3 of Americans who had ever been married reported that their first marriage ended in divorce.
Which is a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot. And I found this this interesting. If you go to the CDC, or I forget the name of the resource, but like the latest census from America, it will say that since 2020, marriage rates and divorce rates have been increasing, which may be slightly misleading though, because if you go back a little bit further, if you go back to the 70s, and I have a graph here, which is it's really insightful. If you go back to the 70s, currently married, it looks I'll try to mirror it. Straight down. Never married is going straight up, and divorced or separated is just like steady. So it's not maybe not. This is why time frame matters, right? If you go back to the last decade, sure, divorce rates and marriage rates are going slightly up. But if you look at the broader spectrum of human history, we're in a decline right now, at least in American history, maybe not world history,
Sure.
but in American history, marriage rates and this lack of commitment is fizzling almost. Also, another statistic for you, 70% of sexually active 12 to 21-year-olds reported having had uncommitted sex within the last year.
Dude, which, holy cow, 12?
Yeah, so
I'm sorry, but that is just insane to me. I mean, now granted, I wouldn't say I grew up in an area where, because there's obviously so much correlation between area that said people live and kind of socioeconomic background, I'm sure, to some degree, right?
Yeah.
But still, that is incredible to me, and not the good incredible, of course, but just
No.
it's staggering.
And that's just, there's so many statistics if you go down this rabbit trail where it's just, it spells out just that, like what we've been saying, this growing movement almost in our culture where treating the marital relationship as almost nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I already mentioned that the currently married individuals has been declining since the 70s. So anyway, it's just this marriage is designed to be this way in which we can almost battle this non-committal culture,
Yeah.
where we can have a strong, healthy relationship with our fellow man. The next reason why you might get married is complementation. There's a quote from Rocky, which if you're listening, you'll appreciate this, where Rocky says, "She's got gaps, I got gaps. She's got gaps. Together we fill gaps."
She's got gaps, I got gaps. You know?
Yes. We are lacking individuals.
Yeah.
We need to be individuals in the fact that we need to have our own self-identity in Christ. But we as individuals have flaws.
Mm-hmm.
We have holes. We have areas in which we are not good at things.
Yep.
And having a spouse is one of those ways in which we can help pick up the slack, if you will.
Well, I think that's cool, and we'll get into this in a few minutes here, but like the marriage roles as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, man, it's so cool to have a helper, you know? Like that's an incredible feeling. No, like we've been talking about, knowing that you're not doing life alone and that your spouse can help fill in your gaps, you know,
Yeah.
where you might be weak. So that's a really cool feeling.
Definitely. We already mentioned Genesis 2:18. It's not good for man to be alone. Why is it not good for him to be alone? There's probably several reasons, as we've discussed. One of those could be that it's just not good at everything. Ecclesiastes 4:9 through 12, though, I think really kind of highlights this. It says, "Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up. Again, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? Though one may be overpowered by another, two can withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken." When we fall, we can have someone there to pick us up.
Yep.
So I think that's pretty self-evident. The next two, we try not to be like super explicit on this channel.
But we're all adults here,
but
so
yeah.
no laughing.
Yes.
We're not allowed.
But in all seriousness, a reason to be married is to continue the human race, is to have kids. It is the intended institution by which more people... I thought you said no laughing.
Oh, sorry, that's on me, guys.
You said no, you're not following your own prescription. Dude.
Well, because I remember I put it in the notes and then deleted it, but...
Yes. Genesis 1:28. God commands Adam and Eve to have children.
Yeah.
Psalm 127, 3 through 5 talk about the benefits of having kids, if you want to read that.
I don't have it up
Okay.
as much as you do.
I may. Here we go. Psalm 127, 3 through 5. "Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are children of one's youth. Happy is the man who has his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but shall speak with their enemies in the gate."
It's cool knowing that, and to kind of flow into our next point here, that is the way that we bring life into this world, right? As humans, God has instituted this way that we as humans have a desire to engage in that activity. But it's also a way of bringing about more life, which is so incredible. And of course now, on a serious note, that is something truly, truly special and such a blessing that we've been given from God to be able to do that.
Definitely. Last reason, right? Perhaps obvious, but if you have little kids and you don't want them to hear about certain things, then
Yes.
maybe ask them to leave.
Yes.
That's your warning. But we are sexual beings by nature. We're designed to be sexual beings. And marriage is the way that we express that.
Mm-hmm.
It's the way that we... there's no other way to explain it. Marriage is the mode in which we express that aspect of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of people, if you look at just what is in media, which this is a whole other conversation, but if you look at what is in media, it is evidently very important to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And sometimes we in the church, I think, can do it maybe a disservice by not discussing it, because it is an important part of people's lives.
Yeah, definitely.
And marriage, we need to take it in context, though. Marriage is the way in which we express that part of ourselves.
Yeah.
1 Corinthians 7 verse 9, it talks about that explicitly. Do you have that verse?
Yeah. But if they cannot exercise self-control, let them marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion.
Right.
So it's an outlet, needless to say, right? For
Yeah.
kind of maybe a bit of a
It's not a nice way of
Yeah, it's
putting
not
it
a nice way of
necessarily,
putting it,
but
but-
it's a way to express that.
correct.
That desire, right? That burning, if you will. That is the mode in which we do it, and so that is a reason. It should not be. I will say this: it should not be the reason you get married.
Correct.
But it is a reason.
Yeah.
1 Corinthians 7 through 9 talks about that directly.
Yeah.
So those are just some of the reasons why you might choose to get married, why someone might get married. I think obviously perhaps the two most important are the first and the last, right? For companionship, Genesis 2:18. It's not good for us to be alone. And also so we don't burn with passion, 1 Corinthians 7 through 9.
Yeah, and ultimately, marriage is the medium that God has approved of and that God has instituted for us to have all of the above things that we discussed, right? All of these are such a blessing from God. Companionship, having commitment, having complementation in a partner, being able to procreate the human race, and have sexual fulfillment. All of those things are blessings from God, and this is God's way of allowing us to do all those things. So yeah.
Definitely. Before we kind of wrap things up, I have some quick tips for that, at least that have helped me in my marriage. Now, that being said, I have not been married a whole year yet, so I think, though, everything that I'll say comes from not necessarily my experience, but what I know. Yeah. So sometimes I struggle with some things, and yes, but I have the knowledge in growing, and the passed down wisdom from people who have told me these things. So take these things probably with a grain of salt because they are coming from a young married man, but also examine them for yourself to figure out if what I'm saying is fair, because I think it is, based on what I've experienced, based on what people I trust have experienced, and what they've told me.
Definitely.
So the first point, you are one flesh. So you need to leave and cleave is the way which TJ said never heard that. I heard that
I just
growing
thought it
up.
was funny.
I heard that growing up my entire life, leave and cleave. And that idea mostly comes from Genesis 2, verse 24. And it says, this is right after God institutes marriage. It says, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. That idea, that verse kind of holds perhaps a lot of ideas. You can make the argument that it holds a lot of ideas based on kind of what we were talking about previously with sexual fulfillment and engagement, especially the one flesh part.
Yeah.
But I think in that, and this kind of is what is conveyed with the leave and cleave phrase, it's this idea that you are leaving your own families. You're joining together with another person and creating your family.
Ownership.
Yes. And I know for me, what I have noticed in other people is if one person doesn't leave and cleave, there are usually a lot of problems.
Yeah, because physically, yes, you may be living in the same house with your spouse. Rhyme. I'm Dr. Seuss over here. But actually, we're just kind of Dr. Seussing all over the place. Leave and cleave, house, spouse. This is crazy.
Could write a book.
I know, right? That'd be a weird book. Marriage explained by Dr. Seuss. But no, I mean, the person, your spouse may be physically living with you, but emotionally they're still connected to their parents and codependency upon your parents, right?
And obviously, this is not saying just abandon your parents' your relationship with your parents. But this is saying, for me, right? If I had to choose between a relationship with my parents and a relationship with my wife. I made the commitment to my wife when I married her. I'm going to choose this relationship above any of the other relationships I have.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
it's because it's for this very reason, right? I have joined with her to make this family.
Yep.
And take it for what it's worth, but from what I've seen, when this doesn't happen, there are problems because the in-laws are not you,
Yep.
and they want things that you or your spouse don't want,
Mm-hmm.
and that usually causes problems, not for them, but for you in the marriage.
Yeah.
So take it for what it is, but I think that has a lot of basis in Scripture.
Yeah, I like that.
Second point, be interdependent, not codependent.
Which I love that. Interdependency.
I'm
Love
not,
that.
if that's another psychological term, interdependent, I'm not
But, yeah.
familiar with it. I can just had that thought. And this mostly comes from 1 Peter 3:7. Now, this verse is specifically addressed to men, but I think it carries a grain of truth that is important for both men and women. Do you have that?
Which, yeah, I do, but interdependence, that actually is a real thing.
Oh, no.
At least according to AI Overview. It is a mutually beneficial reciprocal relationship where individual groups or systems rely on each other while maintaining personal autonomy. Look at that. He came up with a word that already existed.
I'm smart.
Bro is Webster himself.
And it meant what I meant it to mean.
This is incredible.
Dude.
This is incredible. Well, I know you pulled up 1 Peter 3:7, but I'll go ahead and read it. Husbands likewise dwell with them with understanding, giving honor to the wife as to the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers may not be hindered.
Right. So,
Great verse.
a failing of men. This is not an episode about men's roles and failings of men, or vice versa. Sometimes, though, it can be a failing of a man that you can be very hyper intellectual, too logical. You're not necessarily considering your wife's emotions. I'm guilty of that. It has its benefits, but also its downsides.
Yep.
I think it has its place. Anyway, I'm getting too far into it. But that verse specifically addressed to men emphasizes the importance of consideration for being empathetic and sympathetic to your spouse's emotional needs.
Yep.
I think this is true for both men and women too, right? We both need to be focused on what the other person is struggling with, is concerned about, is upset with.
If those are not your issues as well as theirs, then we probably have some other things that need to be talked about.
If my wife is worried about something, I try to be worried about it.
Yeah.
And it's not, I may not be worried about it in the same way, but it's distressing to her.
Yeah.
So something about it should be at least slightly distressing to me, if for no other reason, so that I can try to remove the distressing element of it.
Exactly.
So anyway, we need to be interdependent, not codependent. The next point, which I don't necessarily have a verse for this, partially because I think it's pretty obvious, but we need to be kind of united. We don't need to be destroying each other. We don't need to be breaking down one another. I think it's pretty self-evident. You're in a relationship, the strongest human relationship, arguably, that you can have on this earth. You do not need to be doing really anything that actively hurts it. The last point, be loyal to one another. Hebrews 13:4. That says, marriage is honorable among all, and the bed undefiled, but fornicators and adulterers God will judge. This is not the marriage, divorce, and remarriage episode, but that verse right there says it. The marriage bed is undefiled. It should not be invaded with another person. We need to be loyal to one another. You could probably make other conclusions to that, but what have you. The next point I have, which this is also not the marriage roles or the men and women roles episode. Maybe we'll do that at some point. But I think it's important to recognize your roles in the marriage.
Definitely.
What does that mean for men? What does that mean for women? Men, that means lead with love. The first passage we have is Ephesians 5:25 through 33. Do you have that?
Yes. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word, that he might present her to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she should be holy and without blemish. So husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes it and cherishes it, just as the Lord does the church. For we are members of his body, of his flesh, and of his bones. For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother, and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church. Nevertheless, let each one of you in particular so love his own wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband.
Right. So there have been many people who have had problems with this verse, and like I said, this is not that episode. If it were, I may have gone deeper into that. But what does it say? It says, men, lead your wives. And it also says, specifically, love them.
Yep.
As Christ loved the church. Anyway. And then 1 Peter 3:7, as we've already discussed, emphasizes the importance of a man living with his own wife peaceably and respecting her. And treating her with kindness, especially since, like said earlier, men sometimes have a tendency to be intellectually harsh, if you will. Just for the sake of, to emphasize it, I'll just read it. Husbands likewise dwell with them, meaning wives, with understanding, giving honor to the wife as to the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers may not be hindered. So, well, there's even more to be said about this verse in particular, that if you don't, it can impact your spiritual health, which I think is an interesting conversation, which we could talk about in another episode. But it's important for men to understand their role and to lead their family with love. And then women follow with respect. Ephesians 5:22 through 24.
Which we had already touched on, but
Yes.
I mean, for emphasis, the biggest verse with that would be 33. Nevertheless, let each one of you in particular so love his wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. So it's a two-way street.
Yes.
It's not just one party, and I think people will overemphasize one over the other, right? And not understand that it's both.
Right. So I'll read the 22 through 24, and then I actually have a point on that.
Yeah.
Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, as also Christ is head of the church, and he is the Savior of the body. Therefore, just as the church is subject to Christ, so let the wives be their own husbands in everything. And then 33, right, which you've already mentioned. So, again, this is not that episode, and there have been many attacks to these principles. But what does the verse say? It says, husbands or wives, respect your husbands. Now, you had mentioned an interesting point. Verse 33 mentions both. And if you look, I have a tab open with this passage. There's like this much addressed to the wives.
It's small if you're listening on Spotify.
It's very small. It's like an inch or so. And there's like 4 times as much addressing the husband. What that tells me is, because sometimes also, one of the reasons probably why this, and I think the case could be made, we've swung in the opposite direction.
Sure.
But one of the reasons why passages like these are attacked is because sometimes the commands to the wives are harped on or overemphasized or perhaps misused when they otherwise shouldn't have been.
Yep.
And like I said, I think you can make the argument that sometimes we've swung in the opposite direction. But what just the sheer amount of verse tells me is that it's really, really important that the man loves his wife.
Yep, and too many men don't do that, to where people feel the need to overemphasize the verses about women, right? Because too many men are either abusive or whatever. We see poor example, and people are affected by poor example, right? And it turns people off from wanting to like read these verses and to look and examine them, right? Because they say, well, what about these husbands who are so abusive and all this stuff? And it's like, well, yeah, those are wrong. It says it in the verses that we just read. Husbands should not be like that. They should love their wives. They should honor them. And so, yeah, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. So, and like we've said, this is not that episode. There's much more to be said. There's much more particular application.
Yeah.
But I think in our culture, as it has degraded the marriage relationship in general, the roles that are supposed to be found therein have also been degraded,
Yeah.
right? There's a lot more to be said about this, but we need, I think, the biblical view of marriage is the healthy one. It's the correct one. I think God knows what he's doing.
Yep.
And we sometimes forget that. So one of the ways that you can perhaps have a good marriage is by following the biblical model.
Yeah,
But like I said, there's more to be said about that. So do you want to kind of head
Yeah.
to wrap this up?
Yeah, so some concluding thoughts. Ultimately, in order to have a successful marriage, in our culture, when we are dating, when you are entering that type of relationship, date wisely, right? Date with intention. Have relationships with people with intention. Don't just do it because, oh, well, it's just fun. Everyone else is doing it. No, that is not the way we are to be doing things. Be intentional and be wise and keep God first. And also start preparing now to be a godly spouse in the future. Don't wait till you're in that position to start preparing. Start now. Be the type of person who your future spouse, who basically be the type of person who can win you a spouse, right? Because godly women and godly men, vice versa, will look at the other party and they're like, man, now that's an attractive quality, right? Being godly, now that's exactly right. So start preparing now. And ultimately, marriage is a beautiful gift from God, right? That is something that is to be honored and to be respected. And it is incredible that God has given us this gift and this ability to have these marriage relationships. But like I said before, ultimately, putting God first in your dating and or marriage, right? That will set you more towards success than it would otherwise if you were to eliminate God from the equation. So with that being said, we thank you for joining us in this Bible study. We always love connecting with you. And if you want to reach out to us, if you have any questions, comments, episode suggestions, you can reach out to us at our email, which is beyondthebuilding51314@gmail.com. And you can also follow us on Instagram at beyondthebuildingofficial. And with that, we'll see everyone in the next episode of Beyond the Building.
Holy message shining, thy light shall guide me in the narrow way. Precept and promise, law and love combining, till night shall vanish in eternal day.